Hi, I'm Max and I work at Voyager with Tate and Cameron, and I'm here to present on EDR and Spewer. Basically, everybody seems to want the same thing from Kazoo, which it doesn't do very well, which is getting real-time events out of Kazoo that you can use in external applications. Like a warboard or being able to see who is waiting in various queues and all that sort of thing. And there's not really a good way to do that currently in Kazoo. What we do have in Kazoo for events are AMQP messages. So Kazoo uses RabbitMQ to send events between applications. You can consume these within Kazoo, or you can write external applications that receive these events that bind directly to the AMQP exchange. You can use webhooks to get these events out of Kazoo, or WebSockets with Black Hole. And these events can be filtered based on binding to different exchanges or by using routing keys. This is what makes Kazoo so fault tolerant, because basically the sender doesn't care who receives the message. It's just anybody that can process the message and respond to it. For the purpose of getting events out of Kazoo, RabbitMQ isn't a great solution. So Kazoo has this notion of a CAPI module, which is kind of like an interface to these events, which has schema validation and allows you to bind to them easier. But that schema validation actually is incredibly annoying if you're wanting to send out lots of events, because you need to rigidly define each of possible event you want to send. And that's just impractical if you want to be sending out events all the time as if you're logging it. The other disadvantage of using AMQP is it's used for call routing, and we really, really don't want to take that down by sending too many events. And everybody seems to be a bit scared of AMQP going down. And we kind of have limited ways of getting these AMQP events out of Kazoo. You can use a RabbitMQ client and WebSockets or webhooks, but none of these are great systems for interfacing with external applications. Logging is a lot more verbose. You can have a lot more things going on and events, but if you've ever looked at Kazoo's logs, most of what's in there is crap and not what you're interested in anyway, and quite a lot of useful information actually isn't in there. And you could build real-time applications by parsing logs, but nobody really wants to write something to parse logs, and you're relying on the logs always looking the same, which is not really a good thing. And in a clustered environment, you have to pass all the logs on all the servers, which is quite a lot of work. So I'm introducing EDR, Event Data Records, which is designed to be sort of somewhere in between AMQP events and logging. So we want to be able to have flexible events, which you can use both for logging and real-time applications. EDR was originally proposed by Voxter, and SIP started working on it, and then at some point it sort of got abandoned, and we wanted to write a real-time application with call events and thought that EDR might be a good fit for it. So we developed EDR, and we managed to get it accepted by 2600 Hertz into Kazoo 4.2, which was quite a lot of work. That involved submitting it, talking to them not being happy, a big push from the Open Telecom Foundation, and then a bit of a redesign, submitting it back. Then they wanted load testing, which we did. We built a tool to help load test events, and then eventually got it merged in. We've tried to make it really easy to send these events. So here's an example event in Erlang and how you would send it. So basically, it's just a JSON object. You say what app is sending it, what version. You give it a severity and a verbosity, and you can optionally give it an account ID if it relates to a specific account. The implication of giving it an account ID means that users on that account could potentially get that event, so you don't want to put anything sensitive in there, but if you want to tie it to a specific account, you can. And the way it works is you send events from various applications to Kazoo EDR, which will create the event. EDR bindings will then be responsible for distributing the event, which uses Kazoo bindings. And then it sends it to either other applications which are interested in the event, or to the EDR application, which has a series of backends that can be configured to respond to different types of events and send them off to different external services. Like we've done MySQL, Postgres, RabbitMQ, a generic HTTP backend, and a logging file backend, but you could potentially write backends for anything you want to interface with. Currently, the filtering is a bit limited with EDR. You can filter by a specific account ID or a list of account IDs. You can specify whether events for descendants of that account should be included, which is useful if you want all events for a specific part of the account hierarchy. You can filter on events coming from specific apps and on severity or verbosity, where you can specify if you want events of the exact severity or a non-exact one. So if you said you're interested in okay, but not exact, you would also get warning and critical level events. Backends are configured in the system config. So here's an example of just sending events out to Mopin, which is basically a webhooks testing service. You specify the URL that you want to be invoked when events are received. You can specify optional headers. So we're going to specify that the content type is JSON and the binding. So in this case, we're binding to all events from all accounts that have a severity of okay or greater and a verbosity of infinite. Now, this doesn't specify a formatter, so it will default to JSON, but you can potentially write a different formatter for the HTTP one so that you can send it in XML or any other format to whatever service you want to send it to. There are a few disadvantages of EDR though. We don't currently have a good solution for sending events across nodes, so it's not a replacement for RabbitMQ. There is an AMQP backend which you can configure if you do want to relay these events over AMQP, and you can specify which types of events you want to send, so only send the subset that you need to send. We don't have a very precise way of filtering events, so currently you can't say, I'm interested in events where this value is present or anything like that. You have to get, say, all the events from an app and then just process the ones you're interested in. And there's no schema, which was actually by design, but that means that these events aren't great to be put into a SQL database. If we filtered events, then you could just have a table for each event type. So that is a potential solution. Or you could use a database with JSON support. I heard somebody talking in the OTF about Cockroach DB, which sounds pretty cool because it's a SQL database, but actually has JSON support, and you can query based on JSON fields. So that sounds awesome. I might just play around with that. What we need now is more events, more than anything. We've currently done AC/DC, so we have some AC/DC events, and we've been playing around with building an interface for this, so you can see real-time updates of your queues. But ideally, we'd want events all throughout Kazoo that you can process. And event filters. If we put some more work into that, we could do quite a lot more with EDR. Now I'm going to talk about Spewer. So this is the application we wanted EDR for. It's called Spewer because it consumes events from a number of sources and combines them and then spews out more useful call events. So there is actually call events in Kazoo already, which is how calls are processed. But if you've ever tried to build an application with them, it's not necessarily very easy. The events are quite verbose and very technical and actually don't have all the information you'd often want in them. So, for example, there are no events sent out when you execute a different element in the call flow. So you don't actually know what call flow element you're in, only that you're calling out or something like that. And we want to build a receptionist console, and it doesn't make it easy. We also wanted to do something with call reporting, and once again, these events aren't a very good fit. So we've been building this thing called Spewer, which consumes events from a number of applications. Some of these events which are EDR events, and some of them which are AMQP. And we consume all those events, put all the data together, and then send out what we think are much more useful events to be processed by external applications. So we get these events from call flow, so the position in the call flow, and various things like that. AC/DC events, so things relating to queues, and the normal AMQP call events from eCall Manager. Where we're at with Spewer, our code isn't publicly available yet. The code quality is a bit embarrassing because it's still in heavy development, but we've handled most basic calling scenarios. There's just lots of corner cases to handle. And we plan to use this for a real-time wallboard, call reporting, and even debugging. It would be quite helpful to be able to see where things go wrong. Question time. Does anybody have any questions?
I guess I have one. Just can you clarify exactly what the delineation is between Spewer and EDR? I'm not sure I'm following that.
Okay, so EDR is a generic system for sending events around Kazoo, and Spewer is a specific application that is taking lots of events from within Kazoo and applying business logic to them and putting out more useful events to be consumed by external applications. So, for instance, we're using black holes to get WebSocket events, and we want the events that we consume on the UI side to be close to what we want to use. We don't want to have to do all of this processing on the UI side. And the reason for this is we might want to build lots of applications for it, and we don't want to have to put the same logic into every external application.
That answers it, thanks.
So another thing that was interesting, and I'm really excited to see what you guys have done just around EDR and what your use case is. One of the reasons that we originally wanted to do this was to be able to have, whether it was in a call flow or within a native Erlang application, some means of pumping out an event, maybe not even in real time. For me, it was never expected to be like a messaging bus or a RabbitMQ replacement, but it was things like, what does Asterisk call it? AEL, where it's event logging, where it's like, you know, call came in, call was answered. User pressed option 3 on the IVR. Then they pressed option 9 on the next one, and you could build a path. So for circumstances like that, or for ultimately the big deal was trying to get more human readable logging for multi-step scenarios where there are many steps between 1 and 10 or whatever, where something has happened and you want to be able to see them in a linear fashion. So EDR was a way of, rather than rewriting all of the logger stuff, having a way of being able to trigger your own sort of, you know, emit something right now that I'll use later. So finding, for folks in the OTF room there, finding use cases for this stuff, if you think about it as a generic way of logging your own event types, maybe you have your own thing that matters, a phone downloaded firmware. It doesn't even have to be necessarily attached to Kazoo. It could be that your client's router comes back online.
I think a use case that we find helpful is, how do we get events to resellers without exposing them as users to the entire system, or in an external tool where we're capturing log events and segregating. So the idea that someone can authenticate to get that level of detail is huge. We don't know what everyone wants to do with all that data, but there's business logic out there that we can't conceive of that users have. And being able to give them isolated, authenticated access is really cool.
And of course, that also brings up another really good point. Like, where do you send the data, right? Like, you could send it to your own custom application that goes up on a wallboard. You could send it to Elasticsearch. You could send it to wherever. And then you could rely on that application to also help you filter it out if you wanted to trust that.
Is there also like an MODB backend for EDR at this point, to the point where you'd be able to query it and get all the events tied to a particular call? Do we have anything like that?
I think that's what the SQL.
Do you want to answer that, Max?
Sorry, I missed that. Can you repeat that?
The question was a bit like, is there an MODB backend for EDR? That way you could do something essentially the same as CDRs. I know you guys have the SQL backends, but is there a couch MODB specific kind of thing for that?
There isn't, but it wouldn't be hard to write one.
Okay.
I think having a really good example of how and where you can inject EDRs, like for me, the idea was always to create, of course, a call flow object where you could define an arbitrary EDR event, or be able to go in through one of two ways: either watch AMQP events and as a sort of reaction to seeing one go by, generate an EDR, or even just go into the Kazoo code, and anywhere where you're like, okay, well, I really want an EDR when a client has a a call that was blocked on auth-z due to a balance or a restriction or something like that. So you could add another line there that just specifically generates an EDR for that kind of event. But figuring out how to generate those events and make it easy for people to insert their own wherever they want would be cool.
So I have a thought that comes back to the idea of trying to get everybody on the same packages and the same code base. As people are adding EDR log lines that they think have value, they might not be as valuable to other people, and then we're going to get like event fatigue at some point where there's just so much data, especially if you're on like a debug level EDR listener, let's say. We probably would need a way to be able to say, give each event a key of its own, and then give you a way to turn them off by key. So.
Yeah, so that's the more precise filtering I was talking about that we need to do at some point. Currently, that's not really an issue though, because there are very few events.
Is Spewer in Kazoo, or is it a separate? What is it written?
You said that the code quality is too low, so they haven't pushed.
No, I understand that. I'm just curious what it is actually written in, and is it something that's in Kazoo? Like, is it a native app?
Yes, it is. It is written in Erlang, and it is a Kazoo application.
Okay, great.
It's not pushed back yet.
So the idea, I think, or the explanation of Kazoo, at least, sorry, Spewer, the way I conceive it is, EDR is kind of like CDRs, which are not particularly useful. They don't have they've got a lot of information, but they don't have any context. So when you assemble a few of those together, then it has some relevance to the real world. That's the intention of
Almost like a meta record.
right. And so you have to have that logic somewhere. So you either build it in your end user application, or you build it in Kazoo. And so the idea was that we would try and build that within Kazoo to have some basic business logic that takes raw event records and kind of turns them into usable bits of information that have some context. Like, you know, I've got through this particular call flow and someone had pressed 1, you know, to get there. And so, you know, that's more useful than just this isolated bit of information.
I mean, I like the idea because, I mean, you can literally just turn on that WAP, you know, or, you know, Kazoo app on a particular Kazoo proxy, whatever you want to call it, node. And, or just, you know, it allows you to be able to enable EDR versus CDR. I mean, you could, based on how complex you make the EDR, you could almost stop using CDRs.
Potentially, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the idea, and it kind of comes back a little bit to what Kirill was saying, and that's something that I kind of agree with, that to me, Kazoo is more about a kind of a real-time event routing engine. And those events could be of many types, you know, calls is the focus, but
Works really well.
actually, yeah, but it could be a much more generic type of, you know, event, whether that's, you know, social media updates or chat or, you know, all kinds of different things. So yeah, it's broadening its applicability, I think.
I mean, for EDR, you could do something like almost like a Twitter miner. You know, there's companies that make, you know, that are getting crazy amounts of VC for doing specifically just data mining on Twitter.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the sort of thing that I mean, Twilio, I believe, is focusing on that kind of event-based program.
Yeah.
And to integrate across different platforms. It's definitely, I think it's a great, you know, even though it's in its infancy, I think
yeah. Well, we welcome contributions.
It should hopefully turn into something really powerful. I mean, the same way a CDR is obviously powerful, or a log line is obviously powerful. It's just a formatted event data structure, really. And whatever an event means to you is what you can publish and consume.
2600 hertz were actually really interested, and particularly Carl was quite excited about this concept. So they were happy, you know, once we kind of did it in the right way. They were excited to include it into Kazoo. So hopefully it has a good future.
This goes back to standardized builds and releases so that we have automated testing to show load is okay.
Yeah.
When EDR was turned up. And that was what Carl basically needed to say yes. Without any kind of previous control either, mind you. It was like, run it with it, without it, and then with it. Okay. Thank you, accept it. So.
Cool. I have, I guess, one more question. It's how do you structure the these events that you want to look at? Is it just that JSON blurb you've got as like a binding? Is that what it was?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Was the little, you showed like a little JSON blurb. Is that how you bind to the, yep, oh, that one.
This is how an EDR backend is configured to bind to it. So this is if you specifically want events to be sent out of Kazoo. Is that the answer you were looking for?
I guess more like, how do you define that? Is there like do you just create a template for the ones that you want to look for?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you look at the binding section,
okay. That's kind of where that's kind of the maximum level of, you know, I guess templating you could filtering you could do at this point.
It's what we've got at the moment.
Okay, great.
There's a limited number of events at the moment. We focused on ACDC, so there's a lot more that needs to be written in Erlang to get them so that they can then be pushed to a backend.
I guess that's what I was looking for, is like, what are those events that you're talking about look like? So if we wanted to contribute them, what are we looking for exactly?
Yeah. Maybe we could have another session, like a bit of a deep dive into how you would do that, Max. So like, you know, showing people what you had to do within the code to get some EDR events out of ACDC and how you would do that with something else.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to do that at some point.
Cool. Okay, that's great. Thanks very much, Max.
Thank you.
Thank you.